All right, well, good morning, everyone. Rob Bonta, California Attorney General, honored to be here with all of you. And let me first just express my pride and gratitude to this incredible group of individuals who wouldn't be here today without this team effort, this group effort, the collaboration, the partnership. Let me thank Moms Demand for all the work they've done, continue to do, pushing us forward here in the Capitol with our nation-leading laws. Thanks to Brady and to Giffords. Again, we're always here in partnership working together. And I want to just appreciate my fellow legislators who have been leading, continue to lead. Thank you to Assemblymember Gabriel, who I'll introduce in a moment, to Senator Blake Spear for her incredible work, and to Senator Portantino, who never gave up and pushed through a tough end of session last year to get us back to where we need to be on the verge of a signing of a very important concealed carry weapon bill. And I'll say it again because it needs to be said, but every time I'm in a place like this, whether it be talking about housing and homelessness or climate change and climate change deception or protecting our rights and freedoms, I always need to thank our governor for his courageous leadership, his immovable, forceful push to protect our state and our values. And we're here again. And he's going to be signing some very important bills which continue to cement California's reputation as the nation's leader when it comes to gun safety. We're proud of that fact. We're here because of that fact. And in California, we follow facts. We follow evidence, data, and science. That is our North Star. That's gotten us to where we are today. We also lead with our values that include protecting the people of this state from gun violence, protecting our communities, our neighborhoods, our children. And we also commit to action, not talk, action. We do. We deliver. We get outcomes. And so that's what we're here to get done today. And here are some of the facts that we should note in the context of this discussion. There have been more mass shootings than days in the year in 2023. Gun violence is now the leading cause of death for American children. More guns in more places mean more gun deaths, period. Nearly 3/4 of all homicides in California involve a firearm. We lead the world in many things that are good, and in one thing that is horrible, in gun violence. Everyday places are the places where we're seeing the gun violence. Classrooms and offices, movie theaters, nightclubs, concerts, holiday parties, and dance halls. And so we're here to say, once again, we are beyond enough is enough. Enough has long been enough. And we are going to continue to lead and be courageous. And I also want to say this, that there are some who like to claim that they are tough on crime and that they are pro-law and order. But you cannot be pro-law and order if you're anti-gun safety. You cannot be tough on crime if you're not tough on guns. We are tough on guns. We are committed to safety, to gun safety. And so we will continue to follow the facts. Another fact is that people in the U.S. are 25 times more likely to be killed in a gun homicide than those in other high-income countries. The right to carry laws have been found to increase violent crime involving a firearm by 29%. And you're more likely to become a victim of crime, including a victim of gun violence, in states like Texas, Tennessee, and Alabama, states where you can carry a gun in public essentially unfettered. So again, we're committed to action. And 30 years ago, we had one of the highest firearm mortality rates in the nation. And then we started acting with common sense gun laws. And now we have one of the lowest firearm mortality rates in the nation. It is causal. It's not an accident. It's not happenstance. It's not even a correlation. The gun laws have led to our increased safety. And now our firearm homicide rate is 33% below the rest of the U.S. And our children are safer from gun violence than in most other states. So again, it's because of our action. And I just want to make a special shout out on SB 2 that I'm particularly proud of because of its journey and because of its importance. We are taking action to ensure that those we trust to carry firearms in public are responsible and law-abiding citizens, taking action to protect our children from gun violence, taking action to promote the responsible use and storage of firearms, and taking action to keep guns out of sensitive places. This bill follows the blueprint of the Bruen decision. It is Bruen compliant. It is designed to comply with dictates in Bruen and keep us safe here in California. So proud of this whole package of bills, proud of the advocates and activists who are here, the legislators who continue to lead, our incredible governor. Today is a good day. It's a good day for gun safety. It's a good day for California. And again, it cements our leadership here in California as a nation-leading gun safety advocate. So with that, let me turn it over to Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, my recently former colleague and a great advocate on many things, including gun safety in California. Jesse.
Well, thank you, Mr. Attorney General, and good morning, everybody. My name is Jesse Gabriel, proud to represent the San Fernando Valley in the legislature, proud to be the co-chair of our legislature's gun violence working group, and also to be the author of Assembly Bill 28. Assembly Bill 28 is based on a simple premise and straightforward premise that we should prioritize the safety of our kids above the profits of the gun industry. It is an acknowledgement that we have proven effective, life-saving gun violence intervention programs, but what we need is sustainable, reliable, and ongoing funding. This is a straightforward bill. It imposes a modest 11% excise tax on the gun industry. Let me say that again. This is a tax on the gun industry, on gun manufacturers and gun dealers. And it mirrors a comparable federal tax that has been in law for over 100 years, that has always been supported by the NRA and praised by the NRA as a national model. That bill funds the federal tax funds wildlife conservation. This tax would fund school safety, proven violence prevention measures, and a bunch of gun safety measures that have proven to keep our communities safe, including things like removing guns from domestic abusers. It will generate an estimated $160 million annually, so that we will have a reliable and ongoing source of funding for all of these programs. Think about what the Attorney General said. Guns are the leading cause of death of children in the United States of America. That is shameful. And it is also shameful at the same time that the gun industry in recent years has bragged. They have bragged about record profits. And so this bill says at the time that the gun industry is bragging about record profits, at a time when guns are the leading cause of death of kids in the United States and America, we need to do more. We need to do more to protect our kids, and we need to do more to protect our communities. And this very simple, very straightforward excise tax is going to raise historic resources that are going to fund programs in communities across the state of California, programs like the one in Richmond that brought down the gun homicide rate by 51%. These are programs that work. These are programs that we know are going to move the needle. And I'll say a little bit about this also as a parent of a second grader and a kindergartner in LAUSD who very, very recently completed their shelter-in-place drills, their lockdown drills, to prepare for the event of an active shooter on campuses. Growing up in public schools in the state of California, we did earthquake drills. We did fire drills. We did stop, drop, and roll. It was never in our imagination that our children would have to do lockdown drills, that they would have to prepare for the event of an active shooter in their classrooms. So this bill is the result of a lot of parents standing up and saying that enough is enough. It is time to prioritize the safety of our kids over gun industry profits. And I want to say a special thank you to the incredible activists over here, the moms and dads, the advocates, the people who showed up, who made phone calls, and who frankly demanded that we act, who demanded that we make a change. Thank you to all of you, because this bill, this historic bill, is largely the result of your activism. I also want to thank the staff, the advocates who worked on this, our AG, who has been an incredible leader, as you have heard, on gun violence issues and gun safety issues. And last, but most importantly, I want to thank our governor, who has been an incredible national champion on gun safety issues, who has been unafraid to be vocal on this issue, to go toe-to-toe with the NRA, to speak difficult truths when they need to be spoken, and to stand up for all of us. Californians are safer because of his leadership. The data shows that unequivocally, and so it is with deep respect and gratitude, Governor. Thank you for your leadership. We are very mindful of that, and we are very appreciative of your leadership. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce a newer one of our colleagues, but someone who has quickly established herself as a leader in the gun safety world, the author of SB 452, Senator Kathleen Breakspear.
Well, thank you and good morning, everybody. My name is Senator Catherine Blakespear, and I'm excited to be here today to have my first bill signed by the governor. And so I even brought a special pen so that I could commemorate it. I come from having been the mayor of the city of Encinitas, which is in San Diego County, for 6 years, and I was a gun safety champion in that role. And I'm excited to be able to bring that commitment and passion to this room, to the legislative branch, and together with the governor's office and all the advocates who are working on behalf of this really important issue. I'm somebody who has a 9th grader who actually has been through just when I was sitting on the floor of the Senate this year and received the text message, we're under our desks, we're not sure what it is, it's something happening outside. They told us to put our heads down and stay away from the windows. And I know that everything was fine and the threat was apprehended and it never resulted in anything. But I know that there are thousands of families that are going through this, and normalizing the hardening of our schools and the reality that we have to protect people by doing things like that is something that we don't want in this state and in this country. And it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to normalize gun violence like we are. And unfortunately, we're fighting what's happening in the courts. We're basically doing defense. We're trying to say we want our communities to be safer, and we don't want to have so many guns in circulation, particularly from people who shouldn't have them. But it's an uphill battle right now, and we need to have all the advocates here in order to make that change. So I'm really proud to stand here today with our governor, particularly because he has been an outstanding leader on this topic. He's really made it a top priority, and I love that you're so outspoken, unabashed. You walk the talk about reducing the scourge of gun violence in this state. And this type of leadership from our governor and then from my legislative colleagues, it just is really great to join this group because you feel like we really can change the world when it comes to this. Working all together, particularly I want to recognize the advocates who are here today because Brady, Giffords, Everytown for Gun Safety, Moms Demand Action. They show up in their shirts, they come door to door, they advocate, they rally. They're one of the most visible activists here in the state capitol besides labor. And I really recognize the gun safety groups, all of them, for working together to forward this. Because without you, we couldn't do it. We stand on your shoulders. So my bill today that I'm excited to have signed by the governor is SB 452, and it's co-sponsored by Governor Gavin Newsom as well as by the Attorney General Rob Bonta, as well as Newsom, Brady, and Moms Demand Action. And what it does is it requires, beginning in 2028, that every semi-automatic pistol that is sold or transferred in California be microstamped. So have microstamping technology, which imprints a unique code or a fingerprint on all shell cases that are fired from a gun. So what this does is it allows law enforcement to solve crimes more quickly because it connects the bullet to the gun. And one of the reasons that's so important is that we have some gun stores that have a disproportionate use of guns that are used in crimes. And we are able to trace those guns back when we can tell which guns were used and which bullets were fired from those guns. So in 2021, the percentage of statewide gun crimes that were solved was only 40%, which I think is a shock, really. It was only 55% for homicides. This is gun crimes that are solved, because we all assume that gun crimes are usually solved, but in fact, they're not. And these statistics come from Brady, so I really want to thank all of the work that's done to put together those statistics. So we must do better, and microstamping will help us to do that. So as we continue to fight for this safer state and a safer country for everybody, California is leading the way, and we are once again showing what can be done and what should be done to reduce gun violence and protect our residents. Next, I'd like to introduce Senator Anthony Portantino, who authored a bill that I was proud to support and be a co-author on, and that is SB 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blakespear. Thank you all for being here today. I want to give a big shout out to, obviously, Governor Newsom for his bold leadership on gun safety, and of course the Attorney General's office for being a co-sponsor of SB 2, and to Moms and Giffords and Brady for the activists that just demand that we do better as legislators. Thank you for your tireless advocacy. SB 2 has been a journey, as people have talked about, and to me, why it's not bipartisan really, really strikes me. We're talking about making sure that we define who a law-abiding citizen is. The opposition to this bill say you're going to penalize law-abiding citizens. The fact of the matter is we're defining what it means to be law-abiding. If you have a record of domestic abuse, you shouldn't have a gun. If you're on social media threatening the lives of people, you shouldn't have a gun. If you can't get 3 character witnesses to say you're an upstanding citizen, you shouldn't have a gun. And so I want to give a big shout out to the Attorney General's office, the Governor's office, my staff, because prior to the Bruen decision, they were working on making sure that California was prepared post-Bruen. So this bill didn't just happen. It was a year's worth of work with the Governor's office, the Attorney General's office, and my office, monitoring every single court decision around the state to make sure that what we put into law is constitutional. And as the Attorney General said, Bruen gave us a roadmap. And it said you must have concrete criteria, and that's what SB 2 does. It said you can have prohibited places. So let's think about that. Do you need a gun to go to your daughter's AYSO soccer game? I would say you need a water bottle and orange slices, right? If you go to Dodger Stadium, I would say bring a mitt so your kid can protect themselves from an errant ball, not from an errant bullet, right? When you go to the mall, do you need a weapon to go shopping, or do you need a credit card? You need a credit card. When you go to the supermarket, bring your bags. Don't bring your gun. And so that's what this bill does. As the Attorney General says, the statistics show that our gun rules in the aggregate make California safer. And so to stand here with Senator Blakespear and Assemblymember Gabriel with a complement of bills that are going to make California safer. To stand with the activists who, as Assemblymember Gabriel said, want to send their kids to school and know they come home safe. That's what we're here for. The world has changed. We have to make sure that we change with that world. And so that's what this is all about. How do we make Californians safer? And clearly, making sure that we use the resources that are generated from AB 28 on gun prevention and violence prevention programs will make us safer. Microstamping bullets to track crimes will make us safer. And making sure that only an upstanding, law-abiding citizen is entrusted with this awesome responsibility of having a gun permit will make us safer. Having a robust list of prohibited places will make us safer. And so I'm proud to stand here with gun sense allies, with wonderful activists who demand that we as a state do better, with an Attorney General who gets it and leads on these issues, and with a governor who started his career by recognizing what love meant, right? Recognizing that people who love each other should get married, has then turned his leadership onto peace, right? When we make California safer, we make it more peaceful. And his leadership is making California more peaceful. We're in a society where we have an attack on truth. And the governor is on TV and talking to folks about what it means to be a truthful leader and advocate for the people of California. And so I'm honored to stand on this stage with somebody who has been leading his entire career. And it's my honor and my privilege to introduce Governor Gavin Newsom, who is our conductor in this symphony, who is making California safer. Governor, thank you for your leadership.
Practice? Oh, that was good. You guys get 2 of those tapes. I want different angles.
Thank you,
But
Governor.
you know what?
It's my
Actually, what I
privilege.
want to do is sign the bill. Rob, don't leave. You got to be in this bill. Let me sign this. He's got to go. So let's sign this real quick. Senator, I'll brag on you in a minute. That was beautiful. But you're not allowed to leave with all your hard work on this. So this is. Do I?
That's not the special.
Oh, this is okay. This is, and this is on you. We'll start with. All right, we'll do. Can we do the fake before I start? Thank you very much, and thank you for the pen as well. Questions since we did the real work. But let me just get back, and I know Rob has to sneak out. And As we reassembled, just express gratitude. I won't repeat a lot of what was said, except to reinforce my pride in this moment, pride in the leadership of those assembled here. In absentia, the Attorney General, his hard work and steadfastness in the space, to both senators and, of course, Assembly member that has stepped up his expectations of all of us to do more and do better and maintain our national leadership with this first in the nation bill that I just signed as it relates to this 11% excise tax. Look, California has led the modern gun rights movement back in 1967 for different and curious reasons. That was initiated. California, recognizing its role and responsibility to do more and be better, really accelerated those efforts in the late 80s, 1989, establishing the first assault weapons ban in the nation after the devastation of a shooting that shocked the nation in Stockton, California. It's remarkable to look back on the Stockton incident and consider how routinized now that has become. I said it shocked the nation, and it compelled this state to action in 1989. In fact, it was Ronald Reagan himself. Many of the Republicans may want to look him up before they show up to the Reagan Library, that not only signed that first bill in 1967, but advocated in 1989 for an assault weapons ban. Ronald Reagan himself advocated for that assault weapons ban in 1989. A ban, by the way, that Judge Benitez, federal judge, threw out months ago prior to Bruin, saying the AR-15 platform is nothing more than a Swiss Army knife. More on that in a moment. That movement accelerated with Senator Feinstein's leadership in 1994. In the 1990s, California accelerated its leadership even more formally, and that's represented in the numbers that the Attorney General advanced. We saw a significant decline in gun death rate in the state of California between the years when this state asserted its leadership and moral authority, and we continue to lead that national conversation as we do again today, because good enough never is. We recognize humbly we're not solving in every one of the cases for an incident, we're solving for a pattern, and that's an important point. Inevitably, this national debate always is tripped up by saying, well, this law wouldn't have solved for this. But there is a pattern that's solved from leadership, and that pattern is being advanced here in terms of the strategies and solutions that we know statistically, the data bears fruit, save lives, and reduce gun violence and gun deaths. It's not an assertion. The facts are overwhelming. The work that we collectively and those that are assembled here with their moral authority have demanded of us have saved lives. And so we have a responsibility to do more and continue to lead in that conversation. But I will close, and we can have a conversation in terms of the Q&A more broadly on the specifics of the bills. But I do want to make the point that I referenced as it relates to Judge Benitez. And again, I've said this on many occasions. I'll repeat it on many more occasions. As someone who is the son of a judge on the California Court of Appeals, I'm not prone to want to call out a judge by name, but nor is a judge immune as a public servant when they wear that robe from criticism or critique. Judge Benitez, just a week or so ago, threw out, federal judge in San Diego, threw out California's leading bill, and one of our leading bills as it relates to large capacity magazine clips. You have to read the decision. You're not surprised, but read it to understand what we're up against. Judge Nelson, Federalist Society judge that was appointed by Donald Trump himself, threw out our nation-leading efforts as an 18 to 21-year-old to buy a long gun. Got to be, I think, seems obvious to anyone that if you can't buy a beer, you shouldn't be able to buy a weapon of war. But Judge Nelson felt differently, and of course, this was prior to Bruin. That case is also being sent back in a Bruin context under even more difficult circumstances as it relates to the Bruin test itself in both those incidences. But those judges have both gone on record in throwing out those federal laws. The point is pretty damn obvious to anyone who's paying attention. It's great what we're doing, but it may not be enough. I've been talking about the forces of transformation, the forces of restoration, those that want to take us back to a pre-1960s world. You've seen that with rights regression on voting rights, civil rights, LGBTQ rights. You've seen it as it relates to the assault on women freedom, reproductive freedom, and contraception. But they're also trying to roll back nationalized rights or states' rights that have been long afforded in states like California as it relates to gun safety. We're no longer immune from those assaults. You can't just be a blue state and advance a blue state framework. They're coming after these laws, and they're winning in federal courts. And under the Bruin test, which we're very mindful of, and I hope that you heard the Attorney General when we drafted the bill, and Senator Portantino's bill, that it was drafted with Bruin in mind. This is a serious moment, and it requires perhaps a pivot in the way we approach the issue of gun safety in this country. We cannot live with a sense of immunity from what's happening in terms of the rights regression and the nationalization of that diminution of rights with guns and, of course, in all of these other categories. So I continue to make that point because I think it needs to be screamed. I think we need to be screaming louder about this. And you're not seeing it just in the Ninth Circuit, you're seeing the Fifth Circuit, you saw it with open carry, not just on the concealed carry, you're seeing it across the spectrum. A few years ago, you saw it on background checks. You're seeing it in Oregon. You're seeing it all across this country. Hard-fought rights, even in a blue state, doesn't mean those rights will be enshrined. They're being rolled back in real time. And this was happening even before Bruin. My gosh, what's going to happen post-Bruin? So I'm sober here. I'm celebratory because I'm proud that we were able to sign these bills. I'm so proud of these guys. Just extraordinary. These are national leaders. These are all national leaders that are assembled here today. But it's going to require a national construct, a national frame, in order to ultimately address this, because it's a pretty sick thing that we can just casually say it, and we do casually say it, that the number one killer of our kids is guns, and it's sort of just accepted, and not everybody's sort of stopping, saying, well, hold on, can you repeat that? Or, wait a second, what more can I don't want to talk about anything else. We need to solve for that. That it's just somehow so normalized. It's a profound moment. And so I am grateful for this moment. I'm grateful for the many moments that we've had on this stage together in terms of advancing gun safety. But I'm looking forward to raising the bar of expectation and performance and beginning new, I think, a different approach to how we collectively address this rights regression as it relates to what's happening in the federal courts in a post-Bruin world that's going to require a different approach to gun safety in this country. And so with that, I conclude, and with that, we are, of course, here to answer any questions.
Governor, you've opposed tax increases in the past, even when they're for causes you support. So why did you sign this one?
Well, this is, for me, a little different. This is an excise tax related to gun safety that funds mental health services, funds school safety programs, funds our Cal VIP program, which Jesse and his team advanced a number of years ago. I see this a little bit differently in that context. This is not a general income tax, not a corporate tax. This is not, this is, from my perspective, more of a sin tax where there's a cause and effect and justification. The health-related costs, the cost borne by the taxpayers for gun violence is off the charts. Any fiscal conservative should be making that case. The cost of prosecution, defense, the cost of incarceration of people involved in gun violence is extraordinary. And so I think this is a pretty modest investment in prevention and reducing those costs ultimately.
Governor, what do you say to those who say that we should be spending on gun violence prevention out of the general fund rather than a new tax?
Okay. I say I respectfully disagree, and my signature represents that disagreement.
Two questions, and if you'll indulge me. The first might actually be for Senator Blakespeare, I'm not sure, but
I will happily step aside. It's not my first press conference. Senator.
We've had a microstamping requirement in California for a long time. It was obviously tossed in court earlier this year as being unworkable, and the state chose not to defend that. So what's the rationale in coming back now with another attempt 5 years down the line? Is the hope that eventually the technology will catch up, or what was your thinking behind this?
Well, we believe the technology is there, and we just need to do it. So, and I think that's largely undisputed. And so we'll be proceeding as a state with making sure that happens. And if the market doesn't provide it, then the state will. So, and that's a difference here as well.
I mean, I think though that the court sort of disputes the notion that the technology is there, and that's why they tossed that requirement, you know, because
Yeah, look, I mean, we phased this in. There's a 2025 date. There's a 2028 date. With respect to the court, I think they're wrong on this. The technology is there. I completely dispute that. And so with respect to that decision, prospectively, this legislation is sound in the context of how we have phased this process in and our expectations as it relates to the details and the dates.
Okay, and then the other question, sorry, just a little bit on a different note, you know, I talked to some gun manufacturers, gun dealers in the state, you know, about some of these forthcoming proposals like the tax. You know, they're starting to feel as though they're being targeted, and you know, that leaders in the state are essentially trying to push them out of California. Is that the intent?
No.
Is your goal to make it so hard to
No.
do business here that they
No.
have to leave?
How about a little damn accountability? If you're selling a product that's a leading product, purveyor of death for our kids, how about a little humility and grace and accountability? Come on. I mean, this is serious stuff. This is a business. Yeah, look, I understand it sells self-defense, but also is, you know, selling weapons of war. You know, it's the carnage it's too much, and we just can't normalize it. We can't accept it, and so this is a small price to pay. This is pretty de minimis, and it goes into everything they claim to think are the most important things we should be funding. Mental health, somehow that will solve it all, because that's unique in the United States. Mental health doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. That's why we have leading gun death rates, according to their argument, or perhaps they've never thought through the argument. It includes gun safety, I guess, hardening classrooms, which apparently is another strategy that's well established. You'll be hearing more about that, I'm sure, at the Reagan Library tomorrow night. So we're actually using the resources generated to fund those programs, which presumably they would celebrate, since those are important. Makes people more safe, makes people more likely then to look at guns perhaps differently. Maybe that's a good business opportunity.
On the concealed carry law that you just signed, if people qualify for a permit to carry a concealed weapon, where will people be allowed to carry them? It seems like almost everywhere in public
Sensitive
now
places. There are many sensitive places. Senator?
You know, it's common sense to me. You know, obviously you're walking down your street, you're in a public place that you might feel the need to protect yourself, you're going to be able to have your gun. But if you're at the ball field, that's different. If you're at a restaurant that's serving alcohol, do we really want guns and alcohol in the same place? I would say no. Is it a robust list? Absolutely. But when you take a step back and you look at the common sense of the list, I think you can make a compelling argument for every single location that's on that list of why it's on that list. Because there's places where guns and the social circumstance don't mix.
So basically on public sidewalks is pretty much about it?
Public sidewalks, and you know, if a restaurant signs a waiver and allows you in those establishments, we're leaving it up to certain businesses to decide. Same thing with homes. So you know, you as the responsible person with that permit are going to have to do a little work. And again, it's a responsibility. And so I don't have a problem with saying to that community that believes in having a concealed carry permit that they have to do a little work too to decide where they think it's appropriate to have guns and where people proactively allow you to be. This is in the absence of that proactive allowing you to be place, we're going to have a robust list of prohibited places, which I think follow a common sense.
And Governor, you mentioned the courts obviously as such a powerful force in this issue. SB 2 is already being preemptively challenged. Where do you see things going from here? You sign it and I mean, does it take
We know what we're up against. We know what we're up against. We just need to be more clear of what we're up against. We need to talk about it a little bit more. I don't think people fully understand what's going on. I've been making this point to a lot of the federal leaders. I said I appreciate deeply the national leadership on trying to advance and model, in many respects, California's nation-leading gun safety laws, but it may not be enough if the federal courts are throwing them out in a post-Bruin construct. It may mean nothing, in fact. You may be setting up false expectations that somehow these laws will withstand the scrutiny of a history-only framework, a 1790s framework, when there were a few million people living in the United States, not 332 million or whatever it is today. I mean, it's comedic. I've said it to you before. I said it a few months ago when I was standing here. I've had the privilege of appointing 3 Supreme Court justices. I should have supported not just lawyers for consideration, but historians. Maybe historians are better prepared for the world we're now living in. I mean, Bruin is devastating. It's really just a perversion. It was serious stuff. And don't get me started about how corrupt the Supreme Court of the United States is as it relates to what's going the Roberts courts. And it's every other day you hear more information coming out in terms of the conflicts of interest of people like Judge Roberts and others. Or, excuse me, Judge Tom. Well, many of them.
But in terms of the laws
So-
you're signing today, do you anticipate them taking effect?
I
or-
anticipate, I mean, come on. We anticipate all of them to take effect because we think they're sound and we think they will pass scrutiny. You know, the Attorney General, who began his comments saying, absolutely, we feel very strongly that these bills meet the Bruin test, and they were drafted accordingly. So absolutely. But I'm not naive about the recklessness of the federal courts and the ideological agenda. And this is not hyperbolic rhetoric coming from a Democratic governor on the West Coast of the United States. These are judges that were handpicked through a process of vetting through the Federalist Society. They're very honest about it. They're very open about it. I mean, these decisions are pre-baked. They're not even interesting. I mean, feign objectivity is all I ask, Judge Benitez.
Can you give us an update on your efforts to call a constitutional convention and, you know, the role that you see that sort of route playing?
Well, California led in that respect. The leaders assembled here led in that respect. And they moved very quickly. Became the first state. Now we're working with other states. We're working with leaders in other states, not just governors. This is a legislative process after all. It didn't even require my signature. And working with mayors. Mayors have been on the front lines of this. Democrat and Republican and independently minded mayors as well. They've had it. And so that's a coalition we're building and we're advancing. We needed that proof point. Last week we got it as it relates, or about 10 days ago, as it relates to the work of the legislature at the end of session. And we're looking forward to that being a template for the rest of the country and other states.
Mr. Governor, thank you for taking the time. You mentioned former Governor Ronald Reagan. As all these Republican candidates come to the Reagan Library tomorrow night, and specifically ahead of the California GOP convention in Anaheim on Friday through Sunday, what are your expectations from these candidates? What are you going to be looking out for? And what is your message to those speaking at the convention, former President Trump, Governor Ron DeSantis, and Tim Scott?
I don't know if I have a message for anyone, but I think we'll be watching a vice presidential debate tomorrow night.
Governor, you said a couple weeks back that you were going to meet with the leaders of California Forever regarding the Solano County land grab. Did you meet with any of them?
Unfortunately, the meeting was canceled because I went to Climate Week and extended the week, so I haven't had the opportunity to follow up on that. But yeah, to learn more about the details, which I literally have not any additional details since the last time we talked.
Feelings or thoughts on the
I have lots of feelings, thoughts about a lot of issues, as I hope it's pretty obvious on the basis of the last 20 minutes, but I haven't developed them more substantively on this issue.
Governor, as you mentioned, California has some of the best, most gun laws in the country. Yet there are parts of California, like Oakland, that has some of the highest gun rates in the country, or gun deaths in the country. And I'm wondering, do gun safety laws like this, can you bring those rates down in a place like Oakland, or is more needed?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna, just because the Assembly member is shaking his head, I'm gonna let him speak, and then I'll talk specifically about Oakland.
Yeah, it's a great question, and let me just for 1 second jump back to the question about the 11% tax, because I want to clear that up. So I want to make sure, if I didn't emphasize it enough, this is a tax on the gun industry. Is a tax on gun manufacturers and dealers and vendors. Is a tax on people who are making record profits by selling guns. And it's interesting, Alexi mentioned the 11% number. That is not an arbitrary number. That is a number that we came up with because it exactly mirrors the federal excise tax that the gun industry has always supported, that the NRA has called a national model, something that sports shooting federations have held up and said, this is something we should be doing more of. We support and applaud this. And so if we can have an 11% excise tax to protect wildlife, to promote wildlife conservation, we sure as hell can have an 11% excise tax to protect kids in our schools in communities like Oakland that are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. And it was interesting as we were talking about that number in the Assembly Public Safety Committee, one of the committee members noted that is lower than the excise tax on cannabis in the state of California. So there are a lot of excise taxes out there that are much, much higher in the state of California. We view this as a very modest tax that is going to help recoup some of the costs that the gun industry has imposed on our state. Nowhere near all of them, a very, very small amount, but it's going to go a long way to protecting communities disproportionately impacted by gun violence, to protecting kids in schools, to taking guns away from domestic abusers. So we feel that that 11% number is very much something that is safe and justifiable and something that is appropriate. On the point about Oakland, I just want to note, we have, one of the reasons we ran this bill is because we saw the evidence from the violence intervention programs, which treat gun violence not just as a public safety issue, but also as a public health issue, and recognize that we may hear about mass shootings when they happen in certain communities, when they make the national news, but there's a lot of communities here in the state of California that every day, disproportionately low-income communities and communities of color, that every day are feeling the impacts of gun violence and these cycles of gun violence. And there are proven programs with violence interrupters, folks like we have here, who are going into these communities, interrupting those cycles of violence and bringing down homicide rates, bringing down gun death rates, bringing down gun violence rates. We saw the city of Richmond, as I mentioned, had a 51% decline from 2015 to 2019 when it implemented its Office of Neighborhood Safety. So we saw how these folks who are going into communities, working with folks, interrupting those cycles of violence are making us safer. In Oakland, the network of violence intervention programs that were funded by CalVIP reduced homicides and shootings nearly 50% from 2012 to 2018. So part of this program is we have tremendous evidence that there are programs out there that are going to protect communities, that are going to stop cycles of violence, that are going to enhance public safety, and we need resources because those programs are expensive and they cost money. And we, as you know, have budgetary challenges in the state, and this is an ongoing, stable, reliable source that says to the gun industry, you're making record profits from selling products that kill people. We would like you to share some of those profits to invest in these programs that are going to save lives, and we have incredible data to support that.
And incredible leaders like the Assembly member that helped establish the fund. Now we formalized the fund. I think it was a few years ago we just had about $7 million of state funding in that. And that VIP program, $200 million was committed a number of years ago. This will provide that ongoing source of funds for these evidence-based crime prevention programs. Look, as it relates more broadly to Oakland, we're working closely with Oakland, as you know, with the California Highway Patrol in partnership, replicating a version of what we're doing in San Francisco. We put out almost $300 million of crime grants recently. Alameda County was a beneficiary of some of those grants, which will be supportive. We put a loan, a $1.2 million loan for public safety cameras for Oakland. We continue to work closely with their local leaders in terms of providing whatever additional supports they need. Again, doing the same in San Francisco. And this is, of course, separate and above what we're doing on the retail theft side, where we're seeing real progress and we're hoping to see even more.
Governor, thanks for taking our questions today. A few days ago, you vetoed AB 957, the transgender youth custody bill. Can you just explain your biggest concern with that and why that was?
I think the veto explained the veto language. My message explains it. But here's my issue: is that the courts already have the responsibility for the health and safety of a child, so that's foundational. And my concern, to be quite candid with you, is the weaponization for conservative judges and how it can actually be used for different than intended purposes. So I feel like the law itself was sound. And look, I don't know that there are many people that can claim this without being assaulted for misleading. But I take a back seat to few elected officials. I've had the privilege of serving in this capacity or my previous capacity as mayor. That's been more out front in terms of supporting the LGBTQ community. So this was well considered from my perspective, and I was sort of thinking through the consequences and the unintended consequences. I felt it was the right decision.
Governor, should the legislature pass a bill preventing some of these forced outing policies we're seeing at school districts?
We are working with the legislature, as you know, and the response to that same question is the response that I will continue to provide. As you know, we had Judge Benitez, interestingly, the same, adjudicate on this. We had a judge who had another point of adjudication. This was a point we made a few weeks ago as it relates to working with the legislature, that there were these pending cases. And we're working with the superintendent and working with legislative leaders and continue to figure out where to land on this. By the way, I'm very pleased, and I'll close on this because I know we have to go. I'm really proud that we signed a bill banning book bans in California. I mean, there's this group, there's the moms that demand action, and then there's this group, moms that are burning books. Is that the Moms for Liberty? Yeah. Is that what? Oh, is that what they call themselves? Yeah. The Moms for Burning Books have been promoting book burning all across this country. 1,858 in 2021. You saw it, just screaming headlines. Florida leading the nation, 1,400 plus. They stopped counting book bans this last school year. It was 40% of the nation's. But put that in perspective. I mean, this is we're living through a cultural purge, this banning binge from the right. I mean, it's a profound moment. I remember what JFK said more eloquently than most of what he said seemed to fit that bill. He said that libraries, in relationship to that book ban, which is for schools and libraries, libraries should be open to all except the censor. He couldn't have been more right. And I'm really proud of this state for asserting itself. That law went into effect today. First state in the nation that can lay claim to that. And thank you to Illinois for their leadership, goes into effect in January. I think that's an important contrast, and I'll close on the coin of contrast. Everything we're standing up here, the values, the principles, the laws that we're promoting, public safety, freedom, choice, liberty, patriotism, in terms of love for the fellow man, our state and nation, that will be on display as a point of contrast tomorrow night down at the Reagan Library. But I'm very proud of this group of legislative leaders. I'm proud to represent this state, and I'm very proud to have signed these three impactful and important bills. And I'm very grateful to all of you that helped create the conditions to make that happen. And I look forward to doing more in this space. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
These bills, yeah, you guys, we need these back. You can't leave these around. Are you holding? Okay, we all smiling? Oh, you're good.